Okay, my loves, as you may have noticed from the title this week, this is going to be one of the hardest and most important episodes that I have ever recorded. And before we dive in and begin the episode, I really wanted to give you a heads up that this conversation within it, I will be talking about statistics on intimate partner violence, warning signs, and risk factors. And I will be sharing about the recent murder of a woman in my local community here in the DFW area. And I will be talking about the killing of Renee Good. So I will be including references to physical harm and misogynistic language used during that incident. And I want to be very forthright at the beginning of this episode that I know that these are incredibly heavy topics. I have been wrestling with them over the last couple weeks. It's always been something that honestly has been in my heart and not in the back of my mind, but just like always kind of there because of the work that I do, working with women in the process of considering divorce. This is a real intersection where these things often come into the dynamic. And I know for many of you that this episode and what I'm going to be talking about may land very close to home. So I really want you to check in and just know if you are not in a place to take this in right now, I fully support you in giving yourself that space. You can skip this episode, pause it, come back to it later, or listen with someone else who feels safe and can support you. Most of all, though, I want you to understand why I want to talk about this and why I'm sharing this today, because I really believe these conversations, even though they are difficult, even though it is hard and uncomfortable to see this about the world around us, more and more I'm realizing how these conversations can be life-saving. I was not raised in a world growing up where misogyny was talked about openly, where I was trained to see it, to understand it, to protect myself around it. We don't talk enough about the real risks women face when they consider leaving a relationship. And I know that's just because it's difficult. Nobody wants to think about these things. It's difficult to hear, it's difficult to see, but we really deserve to have those risks named, understood, and met with real tools and support. And I would be very remiss to not have this be an anchor point in my podcast and for my women listening. So please understand that this episode, that is the heart of what this episode is about. And most of all, I'm hoping with this episode to not only address the very real danger and fear, the statistics and the facts around all of this, but to imbue you with clarity and empowerment. Okay, this episode is at its heart about safety. It is about linking arms with other women that see what is happening in the world. And instead of us isolating and feeling like to be safe, we need to get small and quiet, we link arms with one another and we say, nope, this is not going to be tolerated. This is not going to be pushed under the rug, and it will be called out for what it is. So, with that said, please check in with your body. Take care of you first. And if you decide to stay, I've got you. So let's dive in together. For me personally, just over a couple weeks ago, a woman in my gym, a gym that I have been going to for, I've been working with a personal trainer for like 3+ years now. An amazing gym that I feel deeply connected to, always have felt like safe and loved there. And I love the other people at the gym. There's a lot of women that go to this gym. And I found out a couple weeks ago that one of the women that I didn't know personally, but I had seen her, she'd worked out at an hour that was right after mine, had been murdered on New Year's Eve. And Those who knew her more shared that we believe it was by an ex, someone that she had broken up with a while ago and even moved states to get away from. And this alone was like really shocking and heartbreaking for me. Even the little bit that I was not close to her, but I saw her at the gym. She was someone I had really thought was bright and strong, and just there was something about her that I knew who she was when they told me, and they showed me a picture of her, and yeah, just really felt this deeply. It was upsetting for me. I was processing it with Joe, and then only a week later, I learned about Renee Good. For those of you that don't know about this, those of you that might be my international listeners, a woman in Minneapolis was fatally shot in the face by a federal ICE agent who there is filmed video of him right after shooting her. And I'm going to prep you, calling her a fucking bitch immediately afterwards. And there has been a lot of discussion in the US right now. There's a lot happening in Minneapolis right now around this. And for me, on this podcast, it is important to be clear and grounded about what happened here and to honestly name the power dynamics at play. Which are that we have, in this instance, a federal agent with training and authority and backup using deadly force against a woman in her vehicle in a situation where the threat that she posed is widely debated. Many people have now watched the video and come to their own conclusions. And beyond all of that, the deadly force was immediately followed by a clearly misogynistic insult captured on recording. Now, I think it is so important to call out patterns of behavior and language that dehumanize women and people with less power. It has been very difficult to watch the media whitewash this, to use what's called passive language in explaining this. You see this a lot with women when there is violence against women, and they make it seem like something happened to the victim instead of speaking about it as the way I am just now. And when someone in uniform, someone with institutional authority, uses legal force and then blatant, dismissive, derogatory language, that really matters because it reflects broader cultural forces. This is what I'm always trying to help you guys see when I speak about things politically on this podcast here, is waking you up to the bigger cultural forces where women's bodies and lives are disparaged and marginalized, even in moments of violence. And I'm not even going into here on this episode the commentary that has flowed out of this, the opinions that people have said that show once again and clarify for us the broader authoritarian forces in the US right now that minimize the use of violence against an individual and instead lean towards respecting, quote, authority. And although this is one incident that is receiving a lot of media and attention right now, this really is not about just that incident. This incident reflects and helps us understand how power, authority, and contempt are intersecting in ways that put women at risk. I've talked about this on podcasts before. I've linked it in other episodes that we are seeing a growing rise in misogyny, in contempt towards women. And that was shown no more clearly than in the words that were said by this man after he killed her. And although this particular death that is receiving, like I said, national coverage, even though it is not a case of intimate partner violence, which is what I'm going to actually focus most of this episode on, it is a stark example of how misogyny and unchecked power show up in our world, and why we really must be talking about all forms of violence that target women. We must be calling out when people want to frame this in terms that at the root of them just show the authoritarianism that we are watching grow in the US. And naming our reality clearly. Okay. This episode, what I love is when we have language, when we wrap words around what is happening and we anchor ourselves into our own truths and we name our reality clearly. Contrary to that making us more afraid, it actually empowers us to act with more honesty, strategy, and solidarity going forward. Okay, my loves. And that is like so huge for me more than anything. Part of I feel like my path in the world is being able to see what is happening, to help digest, make sense of it, and then allow it to be moved out into wisdom and knowledge and language for all of us so that we can take these things, move through them with more awareness, more honesty, and ultimately more solidarity in creating a world where there is in the future less misogyny and less violence against women. So, this episode is about us really, my work behind the scenes in my community, in the one-on-one coaching that I do, definitely around narcissistic abuse has always involved this piece, but I've never gotten to come to the podcast before and really dive into clearly the risks that women face when they try to leave. And not only talking about the statistics and the risks, but giving you all tools and ways to gauge that risk for yourself and then to protect yourself. Because when you are protecting yourself, I think that every woman that looks at the facts of her situation is able to honestly appraise it and then take constructive movement and choices to protect herself. And if you have children, your children as well. As you get out and move forward into safer spaces, you become a force in the world for other women. And it becomes this linking chain going backwards of us becoming the very thing we want to see in the world. So in this episode, we are going to dive into, as I said earlier, some of the statistics around intimate partner violence. One of the things that frustrated me so much and was also a flashpoint for this episode coming out was at the gym later on after I had found out about what had happened to this woman. I happened to walk up on one of the trainers later on that week, sharing with another couple of people that knew her kind of like me, more less personally, but knew who she was, explaining what had happened. And I was honestly just gobsmacked when I don't know this man either. He's just a man at the gym. The trainer is sharing about what's happened and that we believe, it was one of her previous intimate partners. And the man, his response to finding out that a woman at the gym has been murdered, his very first response was to say, yeah, y'all always blame it on us men. And I was so shocked. I had nothing, I didn't say anything. I wasn't really in the conversation. I was walking up. But my trainer, same thing, was just no, we're pretty sure, she went into explaining. And post that moment happening, I have felt this rage build and this desire to never be caught off guard by a man saying something like that again, to in that moment be able to quote back to him the statistics. Yeah, we're probably assuming that because did you know that 1 out of every three women experiences violence from an intimate partner? Did you know that? Like, this is what I want. That was a moment where I'm safe. I'm in a gym. I'm in a space where this man is getting to say something that is totally inappropriate and misogynistic. And the rest of us, it was me, my trainer, not my trainer, but one of the trainers and another woman, did not call him out on it because when you're not educated around the statistics, when you don't see clearly the misogyny and you haven't practiced calling it out, it catches you off guard and the moment passes, right? So I don't want those moments to pass me in the future. I don't want them to pass you either in safe places like that, right? That's a place where this is not a man that I am at risk around, but it is a man that me calling it out enforces to him, oh, women in the world are not just going to listen to you say, yeah, that's what you always think. You think it's the guys. They're going to say, yeah, that's actually statistically real. So we're going to talk about the statistics. Then we are going to dive into the signs to watch for and understand that will help you kind of gauge for yourself individually whether or not you may be more at risk from your partner. I'm going to also talk about 5 important steps for safety planning that I want every woman to know if she's considering leaving an unsafe situation. And I'll finish by sharing with you guys resources that are here to help and support you because research shows that talking with others, having social support, and reaching out and seeking help, both informal and formal, these will be more formal resources. Those steps are meaningfully connected with better outcomes for survivors of intimate partner violence. And I want to be transparent that, y'all, I am not a domestic violence expert. I am not a therapist. I am not trained to support high-risk women, okay? But what I can do is give you more resources. I can point you to the right resources that are trained to do that. And I can continue to raise my voice alongside yours in calling out what is happening in the world and helping those of us that may be experiencing it in our personal lives feel less alone. All right, so let's jump into our first section, which is going to be getting a clear picture of what the research and statistics actually tell us about domestic partner violence, intimate partner violence. So, over 1 in 3 women, that's about 35.6%, have experienced rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. More than 50% of women murdered in the US are killed by an intimate partner, which I think really highlights the risk that we're naming clearly in this episode, the risk that we can face when we are leaving an abusive relationship. In emergency care, 50% of women report a history of abuse. And this one was a tough statistic for me to hear as well. About 40% of those later killed had sought help in the 2 years before death. And this was a tough statistic for me because this sounds like exactly what happened to the woman at my gym, right? She had sought help, she had left the partner, she had moved, and yet she still ended up losing her life. And then finally, at least 5 million acts of domestic violence occur annually against women 18 and over. And out of that 5 million, 3 million, 60% of those involve men. Okay? As much as men, like that man at my gym, don't want to be a part of the problem or don't want to be, quote, blamed for the problem, the statistics are there. They are supported. And these are not abstract, okay? It's easy to hear these numbers. And if you haven't, experienced what I experienced in the last 2 weeks, where I actually saw this woman, she was not just a number to me. She was someone that I admired and loved seeing when I was at the gym working out and You know, there were times where I saw her and I was like, man, she seems so cool. I'd love to get to know her. Like she represents one of those numbers. I don't share these numbers with you to scare you, but to ground you in the facts. Okay. Especially because this podcast is all about whether you are going to stay or go. I know that leaving does not mean safety automatically. Okay. And in fact, more and more what we see is that if you do decide to leave, you are often transitioning into a higher risk zone if there is abuse, psychological abuse, financial abuse. We'll talk about more of that later. If that predicates this, there's actually going to be a higher risk when you go to leave. Research shows that the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is not only those worst moments in it, but it's often that moment when you try to break free. That statistic that risk increases around separation is why this period of time is talked about as being more dangerous. But, okay, and really not so much a but, I want it to be an and, okay? Yes, this is one of the more dangerous times. And here is the critical part to understand. For so many women, especially if you've already been experiencing abuse, when we hear these statistics, when we reckon with the misogyny that's in front of us, we can have our brains get triggered into an either or scenario. Okay, where it goes, so if the statistics say that the risk is going to get worse when I'm leaving, then I must be safer staying. And that is not what these numbers mean. Okay. In some ways, it might, I'm putting this in air quotes, feel safer than leaving, because if leaving means the risk escalates, your partner's behavior escalates, that can feel more scary than staying. And when your brain is trying to protect you from fear and their anger, which you've often been trained to do through the abuse, that can feel really like, oof, oh my gosh, your brain can weight that compared to the danger you're already living in daily. And so that's why we have to once again come back to the data, because the data shows that abuse does not stop or go away on its own. And y'all, I see this a lot. I see this a lot when I work with y'all, when I see you on 90 Minutes, where I'm like, what has the trajectory of your relationship been since you got married? I will see women who have been in marriages for 15, 20 years, and their brain is like, maybe it's going to get better. Maybe once the kids aren't home, maybe when you're not so stressed at work, it's going to get better. And then I check in with them and I'm like, so what's the trajectory we've been on since you got married? And it's like, oh, it's been getting steadily worse. Like every year it's been getting worse. So know that your brain will sometimes play this trick on you where it's like, that healing fantasy, like maybe at some point it's just going to magically go away and we're going to turn a corner and it's going to start getting better. Okay. Statistically, many forms of violence actually escalate over time. And I have seen this as well, that it actually gets worse as we go along. And we are waiting and hoping that it will get better, mainly because we are afraid of the reaction if we decide to leave. So we really have to be very aware of our brain going, if I stay, I'm, quote, safer, things might get better. And if I leave, statistically, I know things are going to get worse. I might risk, the potential of being injured more severely. It can trap you in a false binary of that either or, black or white thinking. And what I want in this episode is a third way for all of you. Okay. It does not have to be either I stay and I'm, experiencing daily abuse, or I leave and then I risk really having something awful happen to me, as shown statistically. Instead, I want you guys to have a third way, which is being informed, prepared, and supported. Okay, my loves? When we stay in the either or, we often don't make a choice either way. Instead, there is a third way, and this is what safety planning helps create. Okay. These statistics are not about scaring you into hiding. It is about being honest about what you are facing and then helping you strategically, intentionally move into a position of support and resources and trusted people that have your back and strategies that will be in place for you if you choose to leave so that you are not doing it alone and you are not stepping into the unknown. Because here's what the data tells us, y'all. Abuse is not random. It follows certain patterns. There are signs and risk factors that experts use to understand who is at the greatest danger. And there are practical steps you can take to reduce your harm and increase control over your situation, including connecting with the professional organizations I'm going to list later who actually specialize in helping women stay safe. And this is where we're going to go next. We are going to explore the warning signs and risk factors that will help you understand if you are in more of that higher risk category. And from there, we will move into the safety planning steps so that you can really, through both of these, understanding your risk and then taking these steps, hopefully move towards more of the third option. In talking about these signs, I want to first, before we dive into them, explain to you and define what intimate partner violence is. As I was researching this episode, creating up this outline, this is the first time I'd ever heard it called that, intimate partner violence, often shortened to IPV. And when we talk about that, we are not just talking about physical abuse, though that is one form of it. And that is super important because as I was writing all of this, I think looking back, would have been like, oh, I've never experienced intimate partner violence. And as I got into the weeds of all of this, I was like, oh, I have experienced this. I have experienced this. And I think that's one of the things that makes it the most difficult for us as women to protect ourselves is when we don't see the violence as violence. There were some details about this woman at my gym that, right before she left the friend she was with, she got a call that was very upsetting. And then she went home. And the next day, her friend found her. And I thought to myself, gosh, dang it, whatever happened to her, some part of her must have thought she was safe with the individual that ultimately did this to her. She must have thought, there's not a risk here. Not a risk enough to have asked her friend to come with her or to stay the night at her home with her or to be with her when this person got there. All things that when I looked back over my decisions, y'all, post-divorce, when I was out dating, I had a little bit of a reckoning with myself where I realized, oh man, there were definitely times I made decisions. There were partners, I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, that looking back, was not accurately gauging my risk around this person's anger and volatility. I was underplaying it. I was not really being honest about the level of discomfort and fear I was feeling. So when we think of intimate partner violence, I want you to understand it as any of these things, okay? It can include emotional abuse, things like gaslighting, manipulation, or constantly being put down by your partner. I see a lot of this when you guys come talk to me, the constantly being teased or put down by your partner. Psychological abuse. These are fear tactics, threats, or isolation. These can be very subtle. I think of one of my clients whose husband would check her receipts when she came home from the grocery store and calculate out how much time it had taken her and ask her and question her about it. Financial abuse, controlling access to money or sabotaging your abilities to work. Sexual abuse, this includes coercion, pressuring you, or assaulting you within the relationship. I have mentioned this before. I'm going to do a deep dive on sexual coercion later this year on the podcast. This is a part of intimate partner violence, sexual coercion, and yes, physical violence as well, right? This is the one I think most of us think of when we think of violence. We think of being physically hit, pushed, but it's all these other things as well. The key to remember that the heart of intimate